Say one thing again about the mindful walk, just something that I noticed that someone was saying. I might go back to ayahuasca, just for contemporary, relevance. Just to sort of really emphasise that. How can I say it? People quite often say, "Oh, I couldn't do the meditation, or I couldn't do the mindfulness walk because my mind was so busy." I've actually heard people say, "Oh, I can't meditate because my mind's very busy." You see, when we think like that, what you're basically saying is you need to be meditating before you meditate. You're basically saying, "I can't meditate because I'm not meditating," or you're saying, "I can't be mindful because I'm not mindful." You end up with this sort of circularity. So it's really important to sort of notice that instinct almost, to think what I should be doing should be something other than what I'm doing. So if you're not careful, even things like the mindful walk or meditation, even that word mindfulness or meditation, it has a little bit of a glow around it. And you think, "Oh no, I can't do that little bit of a glow around it because I just had an argument at the office. My mind's full of stuff. I haven't got any glow at the moment." But mindfulness and meditation are about working with your mind. That's what they are. They're not anything else than that. In some ways, the words are misleading because they make it look like it's a special thing, like a special Buddhist-y thing called mindfulness and meditation. What both of them are is you, isn't it? When you're doing that mindful walk, or when you're doing meditation, what you're doing is you. You're not doing something else called meditation or something else called mindful walk. You're trying to notice the mind you actually have, not the mind you'd like to have, not the mind you think you should have, not the mind that you think you should have in order to do the mindful walk or the meditation, but the mind you actually have at any given moment. That's the whole point of mindfulness, is that you notice the mind you actually have, and you discover, you learn, you fathom more and more ways of working with it. And the first thing to do to work with it is to not problematize it. So the fact that your mind's going off into thought a lot sometimes, that happens to everybody's mind, including my mind. Happens to Shraddha Siddhi's mind. I mean, she's marvellous, don't get me wrong. But she's all over the shop. So don't be thinking there's some mindfulness expert out there who, just sits there, with a blank screen waiting for a thought to appear. It isn't like that, It just isn't like that. It's a fantasy, What you're trying to do is you're trying to learn how to work with your mind, and your mind comes in waves, So sometimes you feel very, very full of thought, don't you? And sometimes I do. Sometimes, particularly if something's bothering me, I'm under a lot of pressure, or, I've had difficulties with someone, then my mind fills up with thought, And then sometimes when I'm on retreat, particularly when I'm meditating sometimes, when I'm communicating with people, when I'm in a deeper communication with friends, at best when I'm listening to music or looking at paintings or reading a novel, my mind becomes much, much more enriched and quietened, And then it goes back to being noisy again, So expect your mind to come and go in waves. Progress with your mind is not linear. I think this whole idea of progress is now very problematic because our concept of progress is technological. And technological progress has been astounding, not without its terrible effects as well, but it's been an astounding change, hasn't it, in technological progress. Every year a new iPhone comes out which can do something else, possibly. So if you think that progress with your mind is analogous to progress of technology, you'll feel that you failed. All you'll do is set yourself up to fail. And what a shame, because you don't need to set yourself up to fail. It's just a metaphor progress. and it's taken from the world of science and technology. There is such a thing as human progress, but it's not like that. Yeah, I can't remember where I was saying it here, but if you think of the mind as something that comes and goes in waves, we tend to judge our state of mind on any of those waves, don't we, in the moment. In fact, we often extrapolate too much from a moment, very often. Actually, what mindfulness is about is slightly raising the water level. And what you'll find is if you practice the mindfulness practice that we're suggesting, if you do that diligently at home, if you do your walking meditation, your breathing space, your meditation, however you think of your mind, that sort of water level of mindfulness will be rising. You'll have a sense that there is just a bit more of you present and a bit more of life present. Yeah? So part of practicing mindfulness is trusting that, however noisy and whatever your mind is, even that intention to think, okay, let's just come back to the body. Blink, and you're off again. Okay, let's just go. It can be just like that. You bounce straight back off again. It's very frustrating. And if you get frustrated with yourself, you'll slow down progress. Yeah? You won't speed it up. Progress, human progress, is not really analogous to technological progress. If you think it is, you'll trip over that and then feel disappointed with yourself, then think this is something else you can't do. You can't snowboard, you can't take ayahuasca, and and you can't do mindfulness. So try at the moment not to concern yourself too much with progress. I think it's a problematic metaphor now. Gradually notice the water level going up in your life. Okay, so I want to move on to this week's theme. So I want to go back to that experience of ayahuasca, which I haven't had. Apparently it makes you vomit. I don't think it only does that, but... and then my experience of LSD and what I said in the announcement about the fact that I think what it gave me was a sense that there was more to my mind, yeah? I think that's the main thing it gave me. I don't personally think you can learn anything in a certain sense in those experiences. What they do is they provoke you to learn something. You see what I mean? I was talking to somebody in the break and they were saying they remembered in these experiences on ayahuasca and then feeling, I want to be closer to my family. And that provocation to do that is very good. One of the things that I noticed in my own life is that my relationship with my family, after I started coming here, changed massively. It's one of the first things I noticed, actually. I was rather separate from my father. My relationship with my brothers was very distant. It had been a very troubled relationship. And very, very quickly I noticed that my relationship with my family improved. Yeah. But what those experiences can do, ayahuasca, LSD, and I'm not encouraging you to take it, is that they tell you that there's more to your mind than you think. Actually, there's much more to your mind than the experiences you have on LSD or ayahuasca. There's much more than that. That actually is just like a smash and grab raid into more, and you're just ejected from reality again. Actually, it's much bigger than that even. Somebody was asking me again in the break, well, what's your experience of looking at a flower now? Do I have that sort of LSD-like experience? And I was saying, no, I don't. But that general sense of there being more to my life that I experienced spectacularly when I took LSD in Cornwall, I don't have that spectacular sense anymore, but the general sense of there being much more to my life in pretty much every area of my life is just much, much stronger. The water level has risen. Yeah? And that's the human thing, is for the water level of your mind to rise, there to be more of you. Yeah? But I just want to remind us, before I talk about the mind, that we don't know what it is. I mean, it's amazing that we have these words like mind, which we trot off quite happily. We don't know what it is. We actually just do not know. We have no idea what the mind is. We think we know, and our metaphor for it is that our mind is like a sort of computer in a shoebox. The shoebox is the world. Our mind is a computer in it. When the computer dies, the world disappears. But the world disappears to the computer, but that shoebox continues. That shoebox that we call the world continues with us not in it anymore. That's our general conception of the mind. A bit like it's again. Often people think of the mind very analogously to how they think about computers. And what's interesting, I find, is that computers mirror our idea of our mind. They play out. They're like an external brain, really. Yes, but that's not. So I just wanted to sort of explode that for a moment, because that's not a Buddhist conception of mind. So when you've got this word chitta, which is usually translated as mind, heart, one of the problems with the word mind is it sounds like thought, doesn't it? As soon as you say your mind, we translate that as your thoughts and thinking and so on. Chitta, the Pali and Sanskrit word, doesn't mean that. So it's sometimes translated as mind, heart. But it would be better to say something like chitta is your overall state of mind, which includes your thinking, your feeling, your mood, and even your body, or not even, and your body. None of which really is encapsulated by the word mind, if you see what I mean. So if you're washing up on your own and those that you're living with aren't washing up, what you'll have is resentful thoughts. I can't believe I'm doing it again. If you're English, you won't say anything. You'll be very polite, but you'll hate everybody. You'll wash up in a slightly noisy way, so as to communicate, subvocally, that your resentment. You'll have painful feelings, and you'll also have painful, sort of contracted body. So that's a state of chitta. Yeah? It involves a thinking element, feeling element, an action element, washing up noisily, a vibe element, and a body element. Yeah, none of which is really adequately covered by our word mind. So when we talk about chitta, we're talking about your mood, really. I think sometimes it might be better to say your mood, because that's got much stronger colouring. But when Buddhists talk about mind, it gets much more metaphysical. I'll come back to this probably, because it's probably too far to go just now. But when Buddhism talks about mind, it doesn't have this conception of a computer in a box, the box being the world, the computer being our mind, and that when you remove the computer, the box continues. Do you see, with that metaphor, the assumption is that the mind is taking readings of a really existing world, the box, which basically continues as you experienced it. That's somebody else's mind. That basically that continues as you experienced it without you there. Do you see what I mean? And you can even think that there is something literally out there which you could get to without mind. Yeah, that what is really there. So the Buddhist conception of the mind means something more like states of mind arising internally, feelings, Vedana from last week, body sensations, thoughts, volitions, instincts, yearnings, wantings, all of that stuff arising inside, but also sights, sounds, touchables arising outside. What we have in this experience just now is mind. You cannot find out where your mind is. Am I in your mind? Am I outside of your mind? The words that I'm saying now appear in your mind without you wanting them to be there. If I carry on talking too long, you really won't want them to be there, but they will be there. Yeah. How do they get into your mind? Is your mind like a box that my words go in and they fill into that box? So, we know, don't we, that when we look at someone, the picture of them is upside down in two different pictures in the back of your eye. Your eye turns them round, up the right way round and puts them together. That must be happening in time, but we never experience that time. There is no way are we in direct connection with anything, whether it's through sight or sound or such. So the Buddhist conception of mind is much more like that it has a external element. Something's out there, but you can never say what it is. And it has an internal element, or seems to have. Actually, even those categories are problematic as you go deeper and deeper. What we'll do is we'll probably come back to this later at the end of the course. But I really want to just be clear that we're not talking about like a computer that we're trying to defrag, if that's still... It doesn't even actually do that anymore. You know, it's not a hardware that you have to do whatever you do with hardware. The mind isn't something like that. It's not a thing that you're trying to clean with this thing called mindfulness. You can have that idea, and that will get you somewhere. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not true. It's not accurate, but it will get you somewhere. So if that sort of thought of, okay, I'm working with my mind in that sense, if it then helps you become more mindful, that's great, and then you'll start to see things more deeply as you go along. Yeah. Just to finish this rather strange metaphysical excursion before we get to something more practical, everyone's going, what is he? He has been trying ayahuasca. He's not come down yet. He kept talking about it. So I was thinking of this example. I've written about it. One of my great heroes is the painter Cézanne, looking at Mont Saint-Victoire. He looks at this mountain. How he perceives the mountain is of this endlessly complex, beautiful thing that he's trying to paint. Then if you contrast that with, let's say somebody who wants to sell plots of land on that mountain, they don't see it as an endlessly beautiful thing they want to take. They see plots of land. Then you see it as somebody who's wants to build a tunnel through it. There wasn't one when Cézanne was there, but there is now. So he'd be thinking of it in terms of geology and how to build that tunnel. If you think of somebody who is a forester, he'd be thinking about how to cut the trees, how to transport them, and so forth. There's no mountain that you can get to beyond your particular way of looking at it. And the way that you look at the mountain creates the mountain, or at least co-creates the mountain in some mysterious way. So if you think that the mountain is just a lump of matter and that all you need to do is burrow through it, that will be what you will experience. That's what you will see. If you think of it as a place of remarkable, outstanding natural beauty, you'll want to turn it into a national park, and so on. There isn't an objective world out there that you can get to outside of how people perceive it. And how you perceive the world creates your world. I'll come back to this later, but I just wanted to before we talk about how to work with mind, I just want to slightly try to expand this notion of what we are. Because those experiences of ayahuasca, those experiences I had of LSD, they just give you a little pointer to the fact that your mind is playing a massive role in your perception itself. Not just in your feelings, in your emotions, in your body, but actually in the nature of perception itself. That if you change how you look at things, things change. They seem to be different outside of you. So when you're on retreat and you had a deep meditation, you'll come out of that meditation and you'll find that the world looks different. It's almost, if it's gone very deep, it's almost as if the world starts to notice you. It's as if the world comes closer to you. There seems to be something being transmitted between you and the world. As if your eye, as in the Renaissance idea, was that your eye touched what it looked at. A beam went out of your eye and touched what it looked at. And when you go deeper in meditation, you can start to see why you might think that. It's getting at something. It's not literally that, but it's getting at something. Don't know completely what it's getting at. It's deeply mysterious. But what mindfulness is doing, genuine mindfulness, is always trying to take you into that mystery, which is a mystery of more life, which is a mystery of your consciousness. Yeah? Anyway, perhaps I'll leave the metaphysics for a moment. I think the reason I want to say that is because for me, it's that kind of perception of mind that motivates me to practice mindfulness. Whatever motivates you is great, but for me it's something more mystical that makes me want to do all this stuff. I need to practice mindfulness, but I need a motivation to do that, and that needs for me to be metaphysical, really, effectively. I don't quite think of it like that, but that's what it seems to boil down to. That aside, however you do it, the first thing we're trying to do is realise that you have got this thing called a mind. It sounds pretty straightforward, but we often don't notice that we've got a mind. What we think's happening is we've got an experience, and our responses, reactions, and so forth are to do with that experience, unmediated by a mind. Yeah? So, just to give a little example, I've probably given this countless times before, but anyway, it's sort of useful. Is with one, as I said, I've got two little girls in my life, 10-year-old and a 9-year-old. And when Alex, the oldest, when she was about 7, I think, or 8, she stopped drawing. She completely stopped drawing. We used to draw a lot together. I went to art school. It's about the only drawing I do now. Used to do it, and then she just stopped. And her mother rang me and said, "Look, she stopped drawing. Can you find a way of, talking to her about that? Have you ever tried to talk to a 7-year-old about why they've stopped drawing? It's not easy." So she said to me, "Martha says I can't draw." Now, Martha is hardly Lucy and Freud. Martha is also 7, and doesn't look to me to be a prodigy. Let's see, but So all that happened is they were drawing together. Martha said, "You can't draw." Now, she probably didn't even mean that, but what that did is it made her feel, "Oh, I can't draw." So that meant that as soon as you came to the idea of drawing, you feel really uneasy about that because you think that's something I can't do. So then when I say, "Well, let's do some drawing," do you see how then she just thinks, "Oh no," uneasy feeling. You don't think, "No, but hang on, I've been told I can't do that." You just have that horrible, unconfident feeling. So I said, "Well, I went to art school, and I can draw, and I know that you can draw." She was like, "No, I'm not having that." She once said to me, she'd realised that her mother was much older than her friend's mother, and I said, "Well, she's younger than me." She said, "Yes, but you're nearly dead." So, the fact that I was at art school was might have been archaeological, So that didn't work. So what I did, I just sort of sat and started doing I said, "Well, I'm going to do a drawing." And I sat and started to do a drawing. And after a while, she just climbed on my lap and started drawing. And I didn't say anything for a while. And then she just said, "I don't know why I believed Martha when she said I couldn't draw." I said, "Yeah, I don't know why. Why did you believe her?" And she said, "I don't know." And we started talking. And then she's drawn ever since, yeah? Now, I'm not saying that little story to show da-da-da. But you see how, I'm sure she would have started again. But if she hadn't, what would happen? Somebody else she'd go to school, we'd go to drawing, she'd have that uncomfortable feeling, that Vedana feeling of discomfort. Then she probably would start drawing. But when you draw, as you know, you often get it wrong, or you think you get it wrong. And every time you do that, you'd feel uncomfortable again. And that would reinforce your sense, "This is something I can't do." Before you know it, by the time you're a teenager, you just don't do that. Yeah? I remember my mother once telling me that she'd been in a choir as a child, and the choir master just said, "Hang on, stop a minute. Who's flat? You are. Out." And she never sang again. So you don't think, "Hang on, interpreting that, Alex at 7 didn't think, 'Hang on, I've been told I can't draw.' And is that true?" We just don't realise that what we've got is interpretation. We think we've got facts. We think we've got the direct experience of discomfort. You've got everything that shows you can't draw. You've got discomfort. Anyone trying to draw will get it wrong, which makes you feel you can't do it. You just think that's a fact. Now, it's easy to talk about as a little story when you're about a 7-year-old, but we're all doing that. None of us get much beyond 9 if we're not careful. We've got these stories about ourselves, about our relationship with others, that we take to be precise readings of reality without a mind, as if we haven't got a mind. You see what I mean? As if what happens is I just can't draw. In this universe, I just can't draw. As if that's just reality. It's nothing to do with my mind. Or in this, people don't like me, or whatever it is. You will, all of you, have them. I've got them. Running stories, narratives that keep you being a particular kind of person. And you'll have lots of experience to back it up. So a friend of mine a while ago once said that he thought he was having a heart attack. So I said, if you were having a heart attack, you wouldn't be able to say, I think I'm having a heart attack. It'd be like really painful. And of course what that did for him is it just made him feel, oh no, I'm having a heart attack and this guy doesn't believe me. So then he got even more panicky, which made him think, I'm definitely having a heart attack because look, it's even got worse now. I can see why you get to the slapping stage. But basically what was happening is a frightening thought was creating all kinds of Vedana, which was confirming your frightening thought, which was creating all kinds of Vedana, which was creating all sorts of thought. So that's what that's the relationship between Vedana and Chitta, is that without our knowing we build a Chitta, a mood, a state of mind, out of Vedana, without noticing that actually what we're doing is interpreting experiences with our mind. We're never in direct contact with experiences. We're interpreting them in our mind. Yeah? So that's the first thing you need to do, that I need to do, is realise that I'm in a state of mind. Yeah? There's lots I could say about this, and I've said a lot about it in the book. So do read this. I think this is really the crux, this chapter, I think. One thing I've said in the book is that you won't be able to work directly on your mind unless you've already been working on day-to-day mindfulness, on mindfulness of your body and its movements, and on Vedana. If you haven't been doing that, and if you're not managing to get around to meditation and mindfulness practice, there's just too many. It's too much. The odds are stacked against you too much. The reason you practice mindfulness, the reason you practice meditation, the reason you go on to a retreat is to create more space in your life so that you can see that you have a mind, and that mind is creating your life. And then you get a chance to create it the way you want to create it. Until then, you're just stuck in your state very often. It's not that it's not that we get into a mood gets into us, doesn't it? So what I want to recommend, and this isn't in the book, but that's all right because I wrote it, I can make it up. I only wrote it in my bedroom upstairs. What I want to recommend is that this week is practicing reaction practice. What I want to call reaction practice. There's actually a lot more to this practice than I'll say tonight, but I might come back to it later on. I can never tell when I'm teaching what I'm going to do. So with reaction practice, this is particularly good for reactions in the sense of when you feel aversive, anxious, critical, that kind of reaction. It's not quite so good for when you feel lustful and all that kind of stuff. So you carry on feeling lustful. We'll come to that later. Just let that ride for a bit. Just say, well, I'm not doing that this week. So you can let the lust run on. That was a joke. So with reaction practice, the first thing you have to do is much trickier than it sounds. The first thing you have to do is notice that you're now having a reaction. Yeah? And you'll know because you'll suddenly feel the inflaming up, the boiling up of a chitta. Yeah? So I just got back from this long meeting retreat, whatever I was on just today at 4 o'clock, and I had some disappointing news. And I don't know if you experience disappointment. It sort of drags around with you. It's like having a smelly dog that you can't get rid of. Just disappointed. It can be very strong, kind of very, very powerful experience. Disappointment. So say it's that, it's an experience of disappointment, or somebody in my group was saying, they had a real difficult communication, row with a work colleague. They were probably exhibiting challenging behaviour. In other words, they were a pain in the So see whether you can notice a flaring up of chitta. Because often you don't notice your chittas very much. They just sort of a bit grey and a bit neutral. But when something goes wrong, when somebody sends you that horrible email, when you feel criticised, you feel that flaring up of chitta, or you feel, feel really disappointed. You feel suddenly a chitta. See whether you can, first of all this week, start to practice noticing that. If you don't know where to notice, meetings are a good place where you experience it. They're often in meetings. Any crunch point is somewhere you might experience it, on the tube, for instance. Personal relationships are often places where you experience it. Try to see whether you can notice chitta flaring up. Now, the first thing to do is not to let it boil over into action. So, the Buddhist metaphor, it's like boiling milk. You know, when you put milk on the saucer, suddenly it overboils and goes over the edge. So the first thing is to get it off the heat. Now, the way you get it off the heat is to not act out of it, which means not saying anything, not slamming any doors, not doing that noisy washing up, not sending off that email where you say, well, you consciously decide not to boil over into action. Nearly always that boiling over into action is counterproductive, because usually the other person just boils over as well, and then before you know it, you've got milk all over the place. So try not to let it boil over into action, but you really use it as a cue. So don't then feel guilty about reaction. So it's not a question of, oh no, I can't believe that I'm trying to do this Buddhisty thing for 8 weeks and I'm not very Buddhisty at the moment. Don't get into a guilt thing about it, whether it's anger, disappointment, rage, resentment, whatever it is, just that sort of threatened feeling. Sometimes that's all you can say about it. You just feel really threatened. It's quite common in meetings, for instance, to feel very threatened. Try and use it as a cue to just think, hang on, that's that chitta thing that we were talking about. What is that? So the next thing to do, first of all, you don't act on it. The second thing is that you don't feel guilty about it. You don't sort of pejoratize it, whatever it is. And that's fine because you're not acting on it. If you do act on it, then yes, sometimes shame at least is appropriate. But you're not acting on it, so you don't need to feel bad about it if you're not acting on it. Then you just think, okay, this is that chitta thing. What's going on? And the next thing you try to do is you try to stay with that reaction. Yeah? Really try to get up close to it and stay with it. Now, by which I don't mean think about it, ruminate on it, fantasize about it, and so on. Because when you react, the tendency very strongly is to argue if you're aversive. And we all react. I react. Charlotte City reacts. You react. We're all in the same boat. The tendency when you react is to get into a whole big story about right then what they said and what and so on. So just notice that story and keep trying to drop back down into the Vedana, as we were saying last week. Drop that back down into what does this reaction feel like in my body, and can I stay with it? Can I just get right up close to the sense experience, the Vedana? Can I bear it? Can I let it burn me, as it were? The wonderful Sufi poem about allowing yourself to be burnt. So you just settle into it and let it burn through you. If it's very strong, you'll really feel it very, very strongly. So see if you can stay with it. And see if you can, I don't know how to say the next bit, really, but see if you can get a sense of what's actually happening here. Now, I don't mean then thinking about it, analysing it. I don't mean going, well, he said, because that's just going back up into the reaction. What's going on? Quite often it's just that you're feeling very threatened. What does being threatened feel like? Try and stay with that. I'm just feeling threatened at the moment. That's my mind. Doesn't actually mean that the person is threatening me. I'm just feeling really angry at the moment. That doesn't mean to say the person who's just said something is right. Doesn't mean to say that I'm right either yet. We don't know what it means quite yet. I just need to think, actually tell you what, this is me being really angry. What's that like? Where do I feel it? Yeah, get right up close to it. So in that way, you start to notice chitta flaring up. Yeah, you try not to feel guilty about it. You try not to go up into the prapuncture, the stories about it. You just go down into the Vedana. And I'll come back to this later on in the course. You try to then gain a deeper insight into it. But basically you want to ask yourself, what's going on here? But what's going on from my mind? Not what's going on about me and this person or whatever it is. What's going on in my mind, and can I just feel that? Can I really feel it? Yeah? Sometimes it even helps if it's like if you're in a meeting, just think, let me just breathe into it a bit. Let me go back to that mindfulness of the body. All of those things. See if you can bring that into your practice this week. So this week I want you to carry on meditating. If you haven't managed to, if you've meditated only twice last week, see if you can meditate 3 times this week. If you didn't meditate this week, see if you can start meditating this week. Without meditation, you won't be learning how to create enough space from your mind to see you've got one. Yeah? So see if you can start meditating. Carry on doing your mindfulness walk. In the book I've said that you do a mindful moment. You can do that if you'd like, but what I'm suggesting at the moment, I'd rather you do this reaction practice, which is a bit more generic. So you might even have a bit of a think about when do I tend to react in this coming week. I have that team meeting on Saturday, and for some reason that really often gets to me. So I'm going to try and remember to do that practice then, when I'm washing up, whatever it is. So see if you can start to do this reaction practice, which is, at the moment, I'm going to come back to it properly, but at the moment it's about seeing, gosh, this thing called chitta is a really big deal. I've got this mind, and I'm going to have to learn how to work with that. We'll talk more about how to work with it next week, but that's what I want to suggest for now. So let's break up into pairs or threes and say something about how could you take your practice a bit further this week. I was very struck by what Charlie said he was saying about this is a time where you start to lose a bit of motivation. So you might say, tell you what, I'm not going to do the walking practice, I'm not going to do the breathing space, but I will start meditating. Or you might be saying, I won't do that meditation thing, but I will do this walking practice every day, and I will do that reaction practice, so I can come back next week and talk about that. Try and find a way of something you can do and will do, for the next week. And it might be worth thinking, where are the places in that week that I'm likely to react?